Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Roundup. And you know what? This is one that ended up being quite a bit more dramatic than we initially thought. You see, it's been a big but very mixed week for Sony. They revealed a very archaic content exclusivity deal that frankly sucks. They have, though, had record-breaking Q1 financials. Their new state of play actually seemed pretty good, but it contained a trailer for a game that has allegedly been stolen from the game team by their CEO, with the publisher being mixed in right now in a way where they've not really done or said anything about it. And seriously, that story seems absolutely insane. So that's what's going on today. Of course, your support has been great, so I thank you for that. And there's something that many of you probably don't know that we do. It is the daily briefing. That's over on Patreon. There we boil down all the gaming news into one place so that you are always up to date. And that's, of course, on top of the other things we do on Patreon, like our physical loot. So if you're down for getting the news that you need to know in your inbox, then that's the place to go. And there's also weekly features too. Okay, so with that said, let's get into the video, and we'll kick it off with the good news. That is the state of play. And it definitely was a solid showing as far as gameplay is concerned. I'd say less of a reliance on CG trailers, which was nice. In-depth looks at Godfall, the Pathless, first look at Bugsnax as well. That's all really good stuff. I think Sony did a good job of setting expectations going into this one, making it pretty clear that it was for third-party games, mostly PS4, and that there would be no hardware or business updates. And that absolutely is the best way that they could have actually managed the hype there and got it to be just in a sane sort of space. Like, take Microsoft. You know, they really suffered for this very reason back in their very first Xbox Series X showcase. So certainly that transparency is appreciated, and it actually did well. Sony really protected themselves against the backlash that could have happened. Because there is one crucial detail. One of the games may be kind of stolen, or there is some crazy stuff going on, and that is Aeon Must Die. Now, this was one of the most striking trailers on display at last night's show. It had a distinctive art style and high-octane combat that grabbed a lot of interest, and the reveal trailer is absolutely tracking pretty darn well in YouTube. But it's never as simple as it seems, is it? And this is where we get into a bit of a crazy story. So there's another version of the trailer that claims to detail what went on behind the scenes, and it tells a story of abuse, manipulation, and theft. The video description states that the people who worked on the trailer are no longer with the studio, and that some were never paid. It also claims that the real intellectual property for the game was stolen from its creators, and that the trailer was actually released without permission in the middle of an IP conflict. Now, this all led, and the comment also contains the Dropbox link, and it's this link that really has a lot of the information regarding Aeon Must Die, and its Estonian developers, Limestone Games. Now, there's a huge amount of info to go through here, but overall, it tells a pretty worrying story of unbearable working conditions, and that's a quote. Now, according to the documents, what started off as a relatively normal studio environment turned into a culture based on fear, exploitation, and a disregard for employee well-being. Certainly doesn't seem nice, does it? Now, the studio used strict deadlines and fear of the project's cancellation to basically just keep a vice grip on their staff, to really manage basically what staff were thinking and doing, right? Always, you know, it's that thing. You always create a constant state of crisis, and you can use that to further your own control. That's just one of the ways that people can be quite easily manipulated. And in terms of, like, the working conditions, well, there's apparently a lack of proper sanitation, especially regarding COVID, a lack of tools available for employees to actually do their jobs effectively, with very few pieces of software in the studio being owned legitimately. And yes, the Dropbox does contain pages and pages of illegal software downloads. There's then also things like miscommunication when it comes to contracted hours, constant crunch and unpaid overtime, delaying payment and denying leave, and you know that thing of constant crunch and unpaid overtime. You might think that's insane, right? You know, my dad's, he did a conservatory company, and, you know, if him and the boys had to be on site a little bit later, guess what? They'd be paid for all their time. I think we are all people who expect that if you do end up having to do a bit of overtime, that you are compensated for that. If that doesn't happen, it's insane. And on this point, I actually know of one studio that, you know, I can't get into too much, but actually has crunch and unpaid overtime written into their employment contract. Yes, that is something that, well, they do while boasting about their progressive work environment, which is quite rich. And suffice to say, trash like this happens everywhere in the games industry. You'd be surprised. Moreover, the salary at Limestone was also pretty abysmal. It was just over minimum wage, and it was often split between salary and then monthly cash-in-hand payments, where staff had to go into the CEO's office and sign a little book. Which is weird. There's then also reports of apparently firing employees and then expecting existing staff to just pick up their role without any more pay. Now, this is something that happens quite a lot. It happened at Blizzard Entertainment, where they, in their 800 job roles that went, they ended up firing loads of people and then just giving their jobs to people who already were being over-leveraged in terms of their time. This is something we've heard, heard of in multiple cases. And then whenever Blizzard actually ended up trying to rehire for some of those positions, they would rehire at a more junior position, but with more responsibilities. Which, it's a pretty tried and true way of rinsing through staff to basically just get more roles covered while, saving money. Now, for the employees, they were supposedly a bit trapped by poor financial conditions and manipulated into acquiescing due to their passion for the project and their desire to see it through. And it's that sort of thing where using your foot vote, going somewhere else for better treatment and better conditions, that's very easy to say externally. It absolutely is, but when you're actually in that person's head, in their shoes, in that situation, they may not see it like that. And that's how passion exploitation actually does work. And it does not just happen at major studios, it can happen in indies and all across the board just as much. Now, moving on from the worker situation to the bizarre IP one, well, it eventually transpired, right, that the company and the Aeon Must Die IP had been secretly taken from the founder and CCO. The Dropbox documents detail the CEO encouraging the CCO to step down from the board under the guise of alleviating the CCO's workload, only for them to then just be pushed out completely. The CCO then decided to quit the studio alongside the majority of the team, who submitted their resignation letters on June 22nd. Now, that same day, the employee's attorney sent a letter to the publisher, Focus Home Interactive, detailing the situation and pleading for the publisher to launch an investigation, emphasizing that the team still does want to collaborate and to actually get the game finished. Now, as a part of this, the team also informed the publisher that the trailer for the game that was to be shown at this week's State of Play, that violated the rights of artists who had worked on it without a contract and who are actually yet to be paid. So there seems to be just some strange things going on there. Now, a later meeting with Focus Home revealed that the publisher was yet to familiarize themselves with the documents and that they would not delay the trailer because they, I would say, rightly did consider the game's involvement in the State of Play presentation to be a crucial part of the marketing, and that would be true. The trailer did very well. Now, the staff then, of course, decided to generate the publicity for themselves, and that is where the Dropbox came from. So overall, this is a pretty wild situation, and it just shows you the types of things that can actually be going on behind the scenes. And as it stands, according to the staff, there are currently no creative staff working on the game, and Limestone's CEO apparently is just continually trying to hire people that he fired months ago. And of course, we're still waiting on a statement from Focus Home Interactive. Now, it's not the first time they've been implicated in weird things. There was the news last September for them refusing to transfer the title IDs for Frogware's games back to them after their contract expired, instead letting them be delisted, which was a bit weird. And I'm just hopping in with a quick update to this story. The publisher Focus Home have issued a statement about this situation, and they have basically just said, look, we are, the allegations are against the direct employer. As the publisher, we are looking into them seriously, and they said that they will take appropriate action once they actually find out what is going on. Overall, though, there's nothing else that Focus Home could really do, right? They actually would need to wait and actually look into things. So overall, it's the right move from them, and yes, sometimes developers can hide things from their publishers. I too have seen that happen as well in the industry, and in not quite a nice way. So that's what's going on. I am sure, though, that this will be a developing story. If this stuff is true, then it is a pretty grotesque move from the CEO, who seems like a bit of a huckster. And I'd say this, beware when you are starting out in this industry. I have seen a few examples of this in places that you may not have expected to see it, and perhaps future events will permit me to talk about them. But suffice to say, it is surprising how much scum floats to the top in the games industry. Okay. Let's move on to another story. Square Enix and Sony are being, I'd say, a little bit naughty. Now, if you're a PlayStation person, this is all great, but if you're somebody who's not a big fan of the brand of exclusivity that is just, we're paying you to not serve your customers over there, then you're not going to like this story. It's not good stuff. So, this is with Sony and Spider-Man, where the Spider-Man will be exclusive to the PS4 version of Marvel's Avengers. PlayStation players will also have access, 30-day exclusive access, to a legendary set of cosmetics, a free rare cosmetic bundle for PS Plus subscribers, and these are things that Sony call PlayStation advantages in their blog. And this isn't great. But after looking kind of grim at its reveal, this Avengers game actually does seem to be picking up a bit of steam, and it could be a massive seller, especially for Sony, now that they do have some special editions. And while it harkens back to the old days of platform-exclusive content, like Soul Calibur 2's guest characters, that was a bit more tongue-in-cheek of a bonus. This is just far more, we've locked down parts of the game away from other people because we just got a bunch of money. You see, what you've got to understand here is, despite owning movie rights, Spider-Man is not a Sony character. They just have development rights for creating his solo titles. The actual character is free to appear wherever the developers of each individual Marvel title choose. Now, this is purposefully an exclusive deal between Square Enix, Sony, and Marvel. And the studio head shows no remorse for this either, saying those who want to play Spider-Man have the option to do so on PlayStation. So a little bit douchey, a bit, just not very understanding of him. Now, Sony have been using Spider-Man as one of their big characters, so his inclusion does make a lot of sense there. They also, of course, have the beta hitting the PS4 first, so it very much looks like if you're going to be getting that game, it's the PS4 version that you should be getting, because they're just being a bunch of dicks and locking content off. Now, Sony and Square Enix, if you overall think about the big picture here, they do appear to be very good friends. We've got this situation, and then of course there's other things going on like Project Athia, but just the idea of, because we say so, sort of exclusivity for characters is just a bit grim. That being said, there are still plenty of Square Enix games going on to places like Game Pass, across both console and PC, so it is possible, I suppose, that their development teams just want to be best friends with Sony, but maybe their sort of business and sales side just, want one more foot in the door with Game Pass. I'd say most realistically, they're just going to be taking good deals whenever they can get them. So if Microsoft is going to come in and say, hey, Square Enix, want to be in Game Pass? It's a pretty good deal. Square Enix is going to say yes. And then if Sony come and say, hey, we've got Spider-Man as an exclusive, we've got the Spider-Man movie, so we're just going to give you a bunch of money so that we can have Spider-Man in your Avengers game. And if that money's going to make sense, then yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Now, to give you a bit more color on this, and just speaking of the topics of, topic of exclusivity, there are new rumors suggesting that Sony have been very busily working on exclusivity rights for a number of major franchises. So Imran Khan puts it as, quote, there are things you will be shocked to find out that Sony is money hatting. Like, wow, that's a game you're choosing, not because it's bad, but because it's huge. So it's a very big statement out of Imran, and if you think about that, one of the first rumors is that Final Fantasy XVI is much closer than anyone expects, and that it will be a timed exclusive. And that really would be Sony rolling out the beans. Final Fantasy VII Remake became the franchise's highest-selling digital release, so there's definitely a home for Final Fantasy on PlayStation. Now, Microsoft are fighting everything with Game Pass, of course, throwing money at everyone's hands to get games into players' hands and to get more subscribers, but it very much looks like Sony are taking that less friendly approach where, yes, they just want to lock things down so you can only get them on their console. Now, moving on from that, there is actually another bit of Sony news, because as much as the timed console exclusivity is going to suck, well, over here on PC, us PC gamers might actually get away with it. This gen really seems to be PS5 and PC versus Xbox Series X and PC. The consoles are fighting with each other over living room supremacy, but they're mostly fighting with timed exclusives with third parties or their first party exclusives. They just don't seem to really see PC as competition, just extra money they can gobble up if they can. Now, with the vast majority of major releases for both the PS5 and the Series X likely, available on PC day and date. Very much in the case of Xbox, that's often also through Game Pass. It just does give this impression that the consoles are kind of both fighting for second place and that PC is just going to be getting a great deal. If you think about it, in a PS5 and PC versus Xbox Series X versus PC, I think obviously PC wins, right? With the very occasional exclusivity blip. And I mean, thanks to the recent releases on PC of Horizon Zero Dawn and Death Stranding, that, you know, those sort of blips of exclusivity could become rarer in the future. Although on those two games, not everything seems to be as it seems. Death Stranding's been meta-bombed, but only in Metacritic, and it's got a very high rating on Steam, which is probably just sort of backlash to what that game is actually like. And then Horizon Zero Dawn, it's a brilliant game, does not run well, so there's a bit of drama there, and we'll have to have a proper dig into it before we actually see what's up and bring you a video on it. But anyway, I suppose I'll throw the question to you: PS5 and PC, or Xbox Series X and PC, which way are you going to lean? I'll say this personally, if I was thinking just about the games that I would want to play, it would probably end up having to be PS5 and PC, purely because that's going to give me the greatest kind of mix of exclusives from everybody. Now, that said, also, Sony's business model does, I mean, obviously it does kind of piss me off, but that said, there's unique things in their controller and just a whole bunch of stuff there that I do find to be quite interesting. Plus, Ratchet & Clank. I love Ratchet & Clank, so there are my thoughts. Now, moving on, there is actually another interesting thing where Sony are taking a PR hit, and that's on the PS5 Controller Compatibility. So the Xbox plan clearly is just clearly beating the PS5 one when it comes to accessibility. So Microsoft have been very open about the fact that you can use your existing Xbox One accessories, except the Kinect, and peripherals with the Series X. But Sony are drawing a line at the controller where the DualShock 4 will not be compatible with any upcoming PS5 games. Now, this is apparently because of Sony actually wanting to use the new DualSense features for their new titles. Now, that said, they could probably have some sort of compatibility mode if they really wanted to there. Now, your PS4 controller will still work on the PS5 with PS4 games via backwards compatibility, so there is that. Sony also said in the blog that some specialty peripherals, such as racing wheels and arcade sticks, will be supported. I think that's very, very important because, I mean, those can be really expensive. Having to rebuy them for a new gen would absolutely suck. Now, overall, I'd say the fact that people are sort of reacting to this as some sort of anti-consumer nightmare is kind of interesting, and I think it's really far more a situation where Xbox are actually just being so reasonable with what they, you know, just with, I mean, they're literally just saying you can buy a new console and use your old controllers. That is not a part of the business model, because usually the way it works is you sell your console at a loss and you make your money on peripherals and games. Microsoft are sitting here saying, yep, you can buy our console probably at a loss to us, and you don't even need to buy new controllers. You can use your old ones. That is so reasonable that then Sony doing something that's actually slightly more reasonable than what they did in the past actually now seems unreasonable to people. And I think that is quite interesting because, well, things are just overall moving in a more consumer-friendly manner, which I absolutely think is a pretty darn good thing. I suppose really it's just a testament to how Microsoft are just changing how we think about things. They're changing the landscape, and they're doing so generally in a far more consumer-friendly way. Okay, so to cap off our mixed bag of stories today, we do have some financials. This was the biggest Q1 in PS history, with new records in revenue, profit, and software sales. 1.9 million PS4s shipped, taking it to a lifetime total of 112.3 million. That's a lot of consoles. 74% of game sales were digital. That's a new record, and obviously more profitable for Sony, so that's pretty good for them. PS Plus subs hit 44.9 million, which is another record, and very much that stuff Sony will want to keep on going until, sort of like into the PS5. And that is just following a general trend as well of, just games are doing really bloody well in a world where you can only browse through your Netflix library so much, and a lot of people are, stuck at home, and that's what's going on. It's really, really good for gaming, and really it just accelerates. That's the whole lockdown thing. It's accelerating the shift to digital, the shift to e-commerce by years. And I think gaming is one of the industries, because it's wanted to move digital for so long because it's more profitable that way. Gaming has just been so well poised to actually capitalize. Never let a crisis go to waste, I think, is going to be the motto of the game industry, because it certainly is doing well out of the new sort of order of things, the new way that things are going. So there you go. That is it for today's news. Of course, as we mentioned in in the bump of this video on Patreon. We do the daily briefing every single weekday. Adam and Matt put together the daily briefing. It's got all the core gaming news you need in one nicely presented post that also gets pinged over to your email address as well by Patreon. So it's a great way to be kept up on the news. And over there, there's also our physical loot, so you can get, it's Monk Month, so, we're kind of doing fantasy classes, so some sort of beautiful, Asian-inspired art, the monk class pin and all that goodness. I was about to say gooseness. No geese were involved. Anyway, that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Let me know what you think about the general state of affairs here, and with that said, I'll see you next time.